Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. I am your host. I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media, of course, on Twitter /X at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Twitter page at Victory Pod One. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Flex Talk Radio. Of course, on Mondays at 6 p.m., hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox. And so, with that being said, going to get into a few things, of course. My review of Masters of the Universe. I saw this past weekend. He-Man Masters of the Universe. I definitely had a good time. I'm going to talk about the NBA Finals recap of Game 3, as Game 4 is on the horizon very shortly. And of course, fan etiquette, and just in terms of the way these fans just got to do better, just got to do a whole lot better, as well, especially when I talk about the King of the Ring qualifiers and just Oba Femi's trajectory. So those are the main topics at hand. So first things first, I'm going to talk about of course, like I said, I'm going to talk about a Masters of the Universe, He-Man. So like I said, I saw that on Saturday, and like I say, like I said, I definitely enjoyed it. It was very entertaining. Like I said, it was a very entertaining experience, and so and the thing I like about it is how close it stayed to the source material, while also giving a modern twist. You know what I mean? And so I definitely like that. And I also like the callbacks to the He-Man cartoon, especially with or even the original movie with the cameo from Dolph Lundgren. I said, all right, I like that. I see I definitely like that Easter egg. The callback, the tribute, and just the way that they modernize the story in terms of Prince Adam, making him, or rather, how he adjusts to adjust to life outside of Eternia. And it kind of draws parallels to Thor. Not just like, I guess because two strong blonde haired dudes that that have powerful weapons, but also the fact that their strength is not so much in the weapon itself, but but in them, and they're the ones who make the weapon, not the weapon making them, right? And like a Thor Ragnarok, Thor was the one that had the power behind Mjolnir, not Mjolnir really give him the power, that kind of thing. And it's same theme kind of applies to He-Man, and even when it comes to like the color schemes and just the fluorescent vibrant colors and things like that. It reminded me of Thor Ragnarok, which got inspiration from Guardians of the Galaxy. So like I say, it definitely reminded me of those. Idris Elba did a great job as as Man at Arms. This Skeletor was amazing. Um, Jared Leto definitely redeemed himself even if it was just this role. You know what I mean? And the dude that played He-Man, excellent job. And of course when we finally said those words, "I have the power," that's when that power was activated, and just the way that he was able to galvanize and and really bring that team together. I was like, yeah, this is definitely a guy who's a proven leader, a guy who can really bring the best out of everybody. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And what I mean, and so so overall, I'd give it about a 6.5. That's 7 out of 10. And I feel as though the box office numbers don't do it justice. It's definitely, I would say it's better than what than what the box office numbers really tell you. And so of course that was that's my assessment of it. And and of course now I'm going to talk about um, so of course I'm going to talk about the NBA Finals Game 3. Of course with the Spurs, like I said, with the Spurs, with the Spurs defeat the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. And I was like, wow. And And the thing is, especially because of the fact that San Antonio was down, over two, down 2-0, and they won 115, 111, and that game was definitely down to the wire. I was glued to my seat, highly invested, and and like I say, in spite of the fact that who was in the building, an unnecessary distraction, by the way. Which, but at the same time, New York still put up a fight, and San Antonio made sure not to, not to go down 3-0 in the Garden, and so they definitely found a way to redeem themselves, even just briefly. So as far as that, like I said, very entertaining, and a very exciting game down to the wire. Even though the alien Wemby knocked down Jalen Brunson, definitely gonna give him a pretty neat, pretty clean hit. But at the same time, Stephon Castle was the unsung hero for Game 3, and definitely showed that, especially the critical shots that he was making down the stretch, and just the defense that San Antonio had against Brunson, and just really made his shooting night that much more difficult. And so and the thing is, the Spurs just stayed focused, they stayed level-headed, and and they definitely earned that win. On the flip side, I will say that that behavior from the fans after the game was downright unacceptable. It's already bad enough that you had number 47 shut down the city just so that he could go to sleep in the suite. Like, come on now, that was just bad vibes anyway. But to make things worse, for these fans to be that, for these people to be that reckless and just like that angry, like harassing Spurs fans, and especially that video of those fans attacking and attacking and harassing the older Spurs fan, the one with the Tim Duncan jersey. I said, come on now, this like really over a game, dude? Like really? Over a game that that's over a sport that y'all are not paid for, over a game that you can't even afford to go to anyway. And I'm like, come on, that this was just. And I already expressed, my feelings about it on social media anyway. And I'm not alone, because there you got Knicks fans themselves voicing their frustration about it, whether it was, Ben Stiller, Chuck D, Spike Lee, you name it. That type of behavior from fans, that's just outright uncalled for. And like I said, I get it that you have the excitement about the Knicks making it back to the finals and the chance to get their first ring in 53 years. That's a massive drought. But like, come on now. Like, and the thing is, now you see when you see videos like that, you see why the city shut down those watch parties. Because that type of behavior is what makes it bad for everybody else. And I also said this before on Facebook and Threads and stuff, on Twitter as well. Like, I'll say it like this: the people that do that, they're very glad that a place like New York is not open carry the way that Texas is. If they pull something like that in San Antonio, and those people out there are trigger happy. In Texas, they are downright trigger happy. So, with that being said, if they're trying to pop off on the Spurs fan, a guy like that would have no problem firing off several rounds. And fans like that bring that on themselves. And the reputation, that's been created. A lot of that, they bring that on themselves. I'm not saying all New York fans, because I know, numerous people. Like I said, I know numerous people. I have friends, connections, out there in NYC. So, like I say, and I think, people who so follow me on social media. People who've even been on this podcast before, and what support this podcast. You know what I mean? So there's nothing against them, obviously, but I'm just saying that, like I say, like, they're not the ones like that, but at the same time, um, like I say, not all Knicks fans, but we have those, like I said, excluding the ones that I know, but the thing is, you have those who just take it too far. That's what I'm saying. Not all of them, you know, are the bad guys, because I know several of them who are not, but the ones who make it bad for everybody else, like I said, and you wonder why they have the reputation that they have. You know, uh, my dad has even said, and I believe he said um, that New York fans are worse than Philly fans. That says a lot. The Eagles fan base are just downright atrocious, obnoxious. But you know, that blue and orange and Madison Square Garden, oh yeah, and that's a whole nother level of crazy altogether. Like it gets to a point where, first of all, I don't even go to the Garden for a basketball game. I've yet to even go into the Garden, period. But certainly not at this point, probably not for a game. And if I were to, I would not wear a jersey. Seeing the way, it's like I certainly would not wear a jersey. Of course, um, seeing the way they carry themselves and antagonize and harass fans of opposing teams. I'm not letting myself get punked like that. I'm not going out like that. I'm not letting myself get punked out like that. And have something, have something I bought with my hard-earned money get vandalized and destroyed like that. Absolutely not. The devil is a liar. Never. You will never ever catch me hemmed up like that. No. So I'm just saying, like, you know, basketball fans and just fandom in general, you gotta do a whole lot better. A whole lot better. And the thing is, it's already bad enough, the IWC, can be outright obnoxious, but this right here is just like, it's just downright outrageous. And the thing is, of course, I don't want to continue to just spend a whole bunch of time on that, but it's just that um, you know that's just one of those things where I really just had to get it off my chest, and just and just tell everybody how I really feel. um, and like I said, and it's just like I couldn't get with that. I couldn't get with that at all. um, so yeah, and of course, for tonight's game, the Wu-Tang Clan is going to be performing. Great job. And whatever it takes, to purge that, that toxicity, that, the evil out of the Garden after the last game. Hey, whatever it takes, man. The vibes have been restored, man. Seriously, it's one of my favorite, not my favorite, probably my favorite hip hop group, of all time. You know what I mean? Like, straight up. And for them to be performing at the Garden, that's a bonus. And so of course that's it when it comes to of course when it comes to sports. And so now it is time to go into uh, you know the results from the weekend wrestling, as we're going into. So we definitely see, definitely intense fallout from the Clash in Italy. So we have the King of the Ring quarterfinals, where Dirty Dominic Mysterio shockingly defeated Damian Priest, Braun Breaker, and Trick Williams to advance to the tournament semifinals. For the Queen of the Ring quarterfinals, Raquel Rodriguez defeats Bayley, JC Jane, and Keanu James to advance to the semifinals. And then we have a tag match where Jade Cargill and Meechin defeated Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton. And so we see that the Charlotte's thing, throwing her name in the hat, if you will, especially with the way that she helped Rhea defeat Jade with her, interference. Then we have a singles match where Ricky Saints defeated Carmelo Hayes and Lash Legend defeated Chelsea Green. And also, for the main event segment, we have WWE Champion Cody Rhodes. He was confronted by both Gunther and Sami Zayn, setting up heavy tension for the championship picture. So as far as that's concerned, And the thing is, as far as Jade and her group, BFAB and Meechin, I like the way that they really the chemistry that they have together, and I like how they have come together on one accord, and and really have helped bring the best side of each other. Even though Jade is the leader, but at the same time, I like the way that Meechin and BFAB, are being are being elevated in a more higher profile program, if you will. And so yeah, so of course, as far as that, and there's no denying the type of star power that Jay Cargill has, and it's just like all the criticism is about how she can't wrestle. You might as well just you know shut down all that noise anyway. So yeah, so as far as that, like this past Friday, which is more so about the fallout from the Clash of Italy, and I must say that Kel winning that in the qualifying match, it's becoming more and more prevalent that it is time for the Judgment Day to go their separate ways because that group has run its course. They have changed members so much. Like I haven't seen this much of a lineup change right since the NWO. But as I said before, at least the NWO moved the needle. Judgment Day, they've just stayed around just to stay around. Like no real lasting impact on on the landscape of wrestling itself. So they're just spinning their wheels right now. Yeah, so it's just like it's become completely unrecognizable at this point. And of course, we're gonna have more more focus on Judgment Day as far as Monday Night Raw, as we see, of course, with some more matches, we see that Penta defeated Rey Mysterio to retain his Intercontinental Championship. So that was a great match in and of itself. To Luchador Legends, and then we have for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. We have Sol Ruka defeat Lyra Valkyria to retain the Women's IC title. But yeah, like I said, as far as that, then when it comes to the King of the Ring quarterfinal, Young OG Javon Evans defeated Seth Rollins, Ricky Saints, and Tama Tonga. So congrats to the Young OG. Of course, the 6'7" kid Javon Evans, for advancing, and then for the Queen of the Ring, quarterfinal fatal four-way, we have Liv Morgan defeating Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, and Chelsea Green. And for Liv for Liv to insert her name into this tournament to put her name in the hat, and while her fellow Judgment Day teammate Raquel is also in the tournament as well, it's definitely going to create a conflict of interest, and and we definitely need to see more of Raquel and Roxanne grow and shine, and so I think that eventually it's going to be time for them to pull the plug. So hopefully the Queen of the Ring would be the thing to really catapult that, and to catapult that, and really pull the trigger for it. So because that's definitely much needed. And so as far as the fallout from the IC title after retaining his title against Rey Mysterio, Penta was attacked by Ethan Page, Rusev, and of course Dragon Lee and Chad Gable. Of course they made the save, aka El Grande, aka El Grande Americano, original El Grande Americano, Chad Gable. And so his interference, of course, in the main event was Seth Rollins was ambushed and tagged during his tournament match, which allowed Japan to capitalize and advance in the King of the Ring bracket. Even though there are talks, from the dirt sheet saying that Seth Rollins, could be the one, to win the tournament, in order to have another clash with Roman for the title. And there are people who are speculating whether it could be a SummerSlam or WrestleMania. At this point, I'd much rather. I'm like, you know what? We've already had a Rollins and Roman, WrestleMania match. If I feel as though that shine for it to be a Mania, it's kind of dull with this, kind of fade a little bit. And I'm not saying that they can't deliver, but if it's going to, result in Roman taking another L where it matters the most, I don't want it, because it's just like, why keep reheating the nachos if we're gonna get the same result? Because eventually, if Seth Rollins and Seth's supposed to be Roman's kryptonite is antagonized and things like that, eventually Roman's gotta get a W. You know what I mean? Um, Like, eventually you gotta like, you know, get that out your system because eventually The Rock finally beat Stone Cold at WrestleMania. So my thing is eventually Roman's got to get a W over Seth, and it's just like like it feels like they're just dragging their feet with this thing to the point where, as even me as a diehard, I've been starting to lose interest myself. So it's just like, especially when it comes to, you know, um, you have these new dance partners on the horizon for Roman. Of course, with the likes of, of course, with the likes of Oba Femi. And side note, this past Monday, Roman was not on Raw, but but of course, of course, as far as that, speaking of Oba, of course, the ruler himself, he cut a dominant opener promo before the brawl broke out with Dominic Mysterio and JD Bobblehead, which Oba, of course, easily handled, and so the way I look at it like this, of course, this is one of the conversations that we're having on Turnbuckle Talk with Shout Out to Black Wrestling. One of the conversation pieces was if whether or not this is too much too soon for Oba. And as far as Oba getting a title shot with Roman so soon, and I know other people online said they'd rather have Oba face Seth. The title. I'm like, nah. Especially with Roman being the champ right now. So my thing is, have Roman keep the title long enough to have a match with Oba. Strike the iron while it's hot. First and foremost, Raptor. Of course, Raptor's match at WrestleMania. At the press conference, Oba called out Roman. So clearly, that's the top priority. So my thing is, I'd rather keep it that way, rather than, with all due respect, take a step down and have Oba face Seth. It's not an insult, but at the same time, like, come on now. Like I said, a program with the Tribal Chief, Mr. 1,316 days would make even more of a bigger deal. So it's just like I'd rather hold off on it instead of doing like what they did with Brock Lesnar. Of course, very early in his career. I think just because it's just like it's a different climate. So my thing is, you definitely don't want Oba to have a transitional, hot shot title run or whatever. So it's just like when the time comes, you really want that program, that W to mean something, right? So for him to have this Oba versus Brock 2 Electric Boogaloo in Italy, I'm like, come on now, this he could have just spend his time on better things, but without of course it's going to lead to the eventual series finale of that rivalry at SummerSlam. Brock rides off into the sunset. You know what I mean? And so yes, so of course, as far as that, it's just like Oba has what it takes to to be a face, if not the face of the company. I would say that the future is in great hands, especially when it comes to the likes of him and Trick Williams. You know what I mean? And so I believe that those are the ones who are really, really going to be leading the pack. And so it's just like, and not only that, but of course, speaking of Trick, I'm still waiting to see more of a one-on-one with him and RKO. Which we haven't seen Orton since WrestleMania. But yeah, like I said, as far as that, it's just that Oba definitely has the tools. It's just in terms of and he's really, been getting over with the fans, especially with that Oba strut, the entrance thing, man, of course, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't, I'm not ready for him to get the title yet, even though he has proven to be a world beater. I mean, look at the way that he was treated in NXT. The fact that he was that him and Oscar were the only ones to elevate to the main roster right after they vacate. They're the only ones who were able to vacate their titles before going to the main roster. The fact that they were able to relinquish their titles, then vacate, relinquish their titles, without getting pinned. I'm talking about the last title reigns. For them to finish on top of NXT before going to the main roster, that speaks volumes. And so Oba has a certain level of aura, that you really do not want to diminish. So as far as that, and I feel as though, after this Brock match, after this Brock match, I think that's when, after this program, I think that's when you start to slowly but surely progress him and get ready for the next big thing. No pun intended. And in that case, would be like I said, would be the likes of the Tribal Chief. But the SummerSlam. But at the same time, it's just like, and I know this it's kind of like a flip flop, if you will, but as far as whether or not to have Oba versus Brock, I mean not Oba versus Brock, but of course, as far as Oba versus Roman at SummerSlam, well, it's really going to be Oba versus Brock at SummerSlam, but but yes, like I said, as far as that, I think it's more so going to be, like see them, as far as that. I mean, but then again, at the same time, you could have like a program in between with Seth, before you get to Roman. But my thing is, as long as Oba versus Roman is going to have the title on the line, and that will be Oba's ultimate coronation, right? So it's just like, you don't want to drag it out too long, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too much too soon, So of course, that's my, my review of it, at least my viewpoint of it. So as far as that, but at the same time, this promo that he cut, and even the promo that he cut after Clash Italy, just shows that he is on a meteoric rise to just being on a whole nother level. And so yeah, as far as that's concerned, and of course, we also see that LA Knight came out for the break to give a promo talking about his issues with Reigns and the Bloodline, and it's just like, come on now. Once again, like, what has Roman done so significantly bad to LA Knight that he hasn't done, to anybody else? The Bloodline were equal opportunity offenders. They were going after everybody. So for him to take it upon himself to take on this whole team, by himself, and just doing the most, basically. I mean, like, come on, you really don't have to go there with that. So as far as that, pretty much that was it. And so ultimately, it's just like, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be king. When you look at these qualifying matches, right? Everybody wants a shot at this crown. So as far as that's concerned. And another thing I want to talk about as well. Of course, we saw it. Of course, as far as NXT last time, we had Fraxton versus Nolan Barber and Romeo. Of course, Romeo and Moreno. And the winners of this match, of course, Fraxel and Roman Noam Dar. And so, like I said, Fraxel won that match by way of pinfall. And we have the number one contender for the NXT Championship, Mason Rook versus Naraku. And the winner of that match was Naraku, as defeated Mason Rook by pinfall to earn NXT Championship opportunity at the Great American Bash. We're definitely Great American Bash summer season for NXT. Therefore, the number one contenders match for the NXT Women's Championship, Kalani Jordan versus Kendall Gray. And the winner of this match was Kendall Gray defeating Kalani Jordan by pinfall to earn NXT Women's Championship match in the Great American Bash. Then we also have Dion Lennox with Cyrus Griffin versus Jasper Troy. And the winner of this match, Dion Lennox. And we also have the 2026 Mr. NXT pageant. Of course, we saw Kit Wilson come out, who's WWE Evolved Men's Champion. Aaron Rourke and comedian Matt Matthews weighed in as the judges and given the first round to Angels 2-1. And of course, the judges were 3-0 to Hill. And so of course, Hill is now the 2026 Mr. NXT. Like, all right, then of course we have the Women's North American Championship, Tam Paxley versus Zarya, and the winner of this match, and your new NXT Women's North American Champion, well-deserved Zarya. Zarya has come a long, long way, and that rivalry with Sol Ruka definitely elevated her stock, especially with Sol Ruka making her transition to the main roster, and she's now the Women's Intercontinental Champion. So they're both champions right now at the same time. So how fitting is that? And that's of course that's ultimately what it is. And so of course the future of NXT is always bright anyway. And and the thing is also this past week there was a special edition episode of Perfect Plex where of course my co-host Mike and I had a conversation about Roman's place among the all-time greats. I've talked about this ad nauseum. And there are other, of course, there are other outlets on Twitter, of course, right after this episode, asking where Roman ranks all time. So it's just like we just had this conversation, right? And I like to see when we have this confirmation, by the way, it just lets us know, lets me know that I'm on the right path. So these conversation pieces as far as Roman's legacy, and so and of course many people, including myself, were saying that Roman will be a 3-time Hall of Famer. We look at it, I've said it before. He's going to go in for the Shield, the Bloodline, and his own singles career. So I mean, they're not ready. People ain't ready for that conversation. And it was evident, with a certain roundtable discussion or debate that we had on a special Perfect Plex episode this past Thursday. We had a friend of the program and special guests, and we were talking about all-time greats, and his talking points really echo a lot of the same recycled critiques about Roman. Whether it's his booking, whether it's I guess him being a late bloomer in terms of this tribal chief thing and everything like that. But people have to understand that Roman was already carrying the company even before he became the tribal chief. Now he didn't really really become more polished until he became that character. But at the same time, he was still, but at the same time, even before that, he was still top. I mean, even before all this stuff, he was still, a top merchandise seller. And he was still in the main event of WrestleMania even before this. So we're not just going to just use these 6 years, even though these are the best years of his career. But at the same time, even before that, he was still that dude. The fact that he has 11 main events, there's no way he can do that in only 6 years. So that tells me, that he was already picked as that guy. and he clearly had um, certain intangibles and elements to him that really catered to the front office. And eventually the fans, follow suit. You know, Vince has even said, I tell the fans what to like. So essentially that's what that was. You know, um, there are people who weren't on board, but eventually over time you grew to respect it, embrace it, accept it, and the cheers and the ovation that Roman gets, even as a tribal chief, even as a heel, whatever you call it, um, shows that the IWC doesn't carry as much weight as they think they do. Their voices are not as powerful as they think they are. It goes to show you that Twitter is not a real place. Um, so the real currency for the company is like I said, if anything, the real currency, currency for the company, comes from um, casual fans, the live audience, things like that. Not so much, of the angry armchair, quarterback critics online. You know, because whether they, realize or not, their voice is not as powerful as they want to believe it is. Um, and so as far as that, it's just that you have people deep down just can't stand the way that a guy like Roman is loved and is celebrated. And you know, um, our guest from Thursday, who was arguing against Roman, pretty much like say, like say his criticisms, you know, were pretty much very common among so many other people. But at the same time, um, you know, the public perception of Roman is more so favorable towards him versus against him, because you have outlets like Sports Illustrated and Sports Keeda and several others who have ranked Roman very highly within the top 10. And so as much of a fan I am of nostalgia, but at the same time, I still know when to draw the line, right? And just like on Thursday, like they're fans that I hear, like whenever I bring up Roman, and they don't really, want to give him his just to, like it's just because they're so blind by nostalgia, they feel as though, it's too late for him to, uh, you know, make it to those conversations. They feel as though he's missed his deadline, to be recognized as all-time great, even though metrics speak otherwise. Drawing numbers, tickets, merch sales, um, buy rates, viewership numbers, you know, uh, match quality, title reigns, things like that. It goes to show that Roman's a high commodity. And the fact that I'm still talking about it, even though he wasn't even on, even though he wasn't even on Raw this past Monday. But like I said, like he's definitely in that pantheon, right? And as a matter of fact, one of my previous guests, Corey, who is, like I said, who's a wrestling historian, belt collector, fanatic, and everything. And like I said, he's a historian. He respects history as well. He admits that Roman, is really creeping in that territory. You know what I mean? Like he's definitely in a rarefied era, as they usually say in basketball. He's in an elite company. When it comes to rising up that ladder of all-time greats, Roman is creeping like Luther Vandross. He's creeping up to the top. And you have people that just, it rattles their brains, to the point where some people will just find any old school guy, long before Roman to try to make a case against him. You know what I mean? I had somebody talking about Luke Bez ahead of Roman, Dusty. Nah, I can't. R.I.P. to Dusty, but let's not go there. Roman has already cleared him. Luke Bez, I respect that he was, one of the earliest world heavyweight champions, heavyweight champions and things like that. But he's already been eclipsed several times over. The same way that George Michael's been eclipsed, but by the likes of, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq, Wilt, Hakeem, all those dudes, right? And the same way that Bob Cousy's long been eclipsed by Magic Johnson. So, like I said, it comes to a point where, like you have to eventually draw the line when it comes to, the nostalgia bias. Like I said, and my thing is, I've already said this before, and people have already seen, I've done the list before by the top 50. And I believe that my rankings and criteria and just my placements are very balanced, very evenly balanced, to the point where even if you're not the biggest Roman fan or biggest old school fan, you have to respect it. I have, presented it to people on the show, even job tiers, even they admit, that there's a very solid list, and they were even taken aback by some of the classic names I have on there. But one thing that that nobody can argue is where I have Roman. Plain and simple. And like I said, he's etched his place in history. Oba Femi is on track to etch his place in history as well. So yeah. So yeah, so as far as that's concerned, it's just that it's just at the end of the day, you cannot deny when you see greatness unfold in front of you. And of course, and of course, speaking of lists, pretty soon I'm going to, gonna be talking about of course, one of the people's going to talk about Black Wrestling's BRP 50, which is of course, Juneteenth, BRP 50 season, where they cover the top 50, Black wrestlers of the year. And so I'll just say that this list will not be so complex, if you know what I mean. And so yeah, like I said, as far as that, lists have their own criteria. I know my list is nearly not as complex as that complex list of the the top 50 New York rappers. You know what I mean? Of course, the top 5 is pretty ironclad. I rearrange a few names here and there, but yeah, there's no way that Nicki should be ahead of Lil Kim, but that's a whole nother story. Certain names I move up higher, and certain names I just move lower. But yeah, like I said, as far as that, these lists are not only. I'll say it like this: when it comes to lists, there's a certain. It can be subjective, but it comes to a point where it has to be a certain level of objectiveness as well. That's just my take on it. I don't mean to sound like I was rambling, but yeah, like I said, as far as that, um, when you look at someone like Roman's legacy, it's it's pretty much a consensus top 10, ironclad consensus top 10, and there's no hot take in the world that that will override that, because my thing is, hot takes cannot rewrite history. So for as far as that, and so yeah, like pretty much I think I've covered just by everything. that there is to cover it. And and also, side note, justice for Carmelo, because that was just outrageous. That verdict was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, I'm praying that that his family receives the justice that they need, that they deserve, because it's just it's unbelievable. You know, um, I don't want to be long-winded about it, but it's just that like I said, we definitely live in a very upside down, inside out society and justice system, and this right here, it's further proof of that, especially with the climate that we live in, with this regime, and it's just like that's why it's even more imperative for for people's voices to let their voices be heard, um, and for actions to speak much louder than words, and yeah, that's pretty much you know uh, pretty much all I have to to really get off my chest. And I'm not gonna be before you long, especially with the finals taking place right now. So yeah, and of course I also meant to say that of course when also NFL news, um, the Rams have been taking no prisoners. For them to get the biggest free agent on the market, of course, one of, if not the top edge rushers in the league overall with Myles Garrett. So that right there is, I mean, that's a power play right there. That is a massive power play. And in Cleveland, he was going absolutely nowhere. And as I said before, said it before, I'll say it again. The Rams saw the Seahawks holding up that Super Bowl trophy, and it was like, never again, never again. Especially when you're this close to being, when you're this close to being on the biggest stage, and they were at the doorstep of the Super Bowl, the NFC Championship, and so for them to to pull this power play the way they did, I mean, hats off to them. You know what I mean? And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if like I said, if Aaron Donald's looking at that helmet the same way that Norman Osborn looks at that Green Goblin mask, and things got to be talking to him. Aaron, come on now, you're still in great shape. I know you still want to get one more ring. I know you still want to get one more ring. The Rams just got Miles. Come on now, both you and him at the same time. I know you want to do it. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely a shakeup of this upcoming NFL season, and this is definitely like really caused shockwaves, a seismic shift um, in the NFL. You know what I mean? And also one more thing, as far as the gaming news, uh, there was some, as a matter of fact, I already talked about last week with the Wolverine trailer. But for anybody who is a critic of of insomnia of insomnia games, yeah, you like you just tripping right now. You just absolutely you gotta have CTE or something. Or get drug tested. You're gonna be criticizing those developers with the classics. They come out with the Spider-Man franchise and now Wolverine. Come on, it's nothing but W's. They are Insomniac Games. They are becoming a dynasty when it comes to this. So when it comes to the Spider-Man series, like I said, when it comes to that, when it comes to Wolverine, I mean, if anything, the sky is more than just the limit. As far as that with them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And so, and of course, now it's time to give the birthday shout outs. On June 9th, Bishop T.D. Jakes turns 69. On the same day, Michael J. Fox, of course, the legendary Michael J. Fox, turns 65. On June 10th, Faith Evans turns 53. June 11th, legendary quarterback, four-time Super Bowl champion for the 49ers, Joe Montana, turns 70. On the same day, Tim's turns 31. Grammy winner Tim's, superstar Tim's turns 31. On June 13th, Chris Evans, better known as Captain America, turns 45. And on June 15th, Bailey turns 37. Ice Cube turns 57. And on June 16th, Tupac Shakur will turn 55, and Roberto Duran turns 75. And of course, that's it for the birthdays. And before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom. And is that, of course, generosity. And the thing about it is that, open hands reflect an open heart towards God and others. And the thing is, the thing about it is that when God can bring a blessing through you, He can give a blessing to you. And of course, that's my word of wisdom. And always remember that you are victorious because greater is He that is anything He does in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in the last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, or rather Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or whatever that you download podcasts. I'm also on YouTube at youtube.com/Von Rexford Jr. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more great content. And thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for watching. And may this day be the absolute very best day of your life.